Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been digging into your source material today, and we're really stepping into quite a profound idea, spiritual testing, what the texts call trials.
It really is a core theme, isn't it? But what's striking about the sources you shared is this dual nature of the tests they describe.
Yeah, exactly. So our mission today really is to understand that these trials, they aren't just about hardship and suffering. They can show up when things are going great too.
That's the surprising part, and it really shapes how we might think about our own lives.
It really does, because, when you hear trial, your mind immediately goes to, well, the bad stuff. Loss, failure, maybe betrayal.
Right.
You picture someone like Dowd or David, as most of us know him constantly, fleeing, facing enemies,
Hmm.
tested by pure adversity.
Classic trial narrative, yeah.
But the material we looked at insists, really hammers home, that tests also happen when when you're sitting pretty,
Yeah.
like Solomon on his throne, wealthy, peaceful.
Mm-hmm. And that contrast is key. Oh, and maybe a quick note on the names.
Good point.
The sources use names like Dowd and Salomo.
Yeah.
We'll mostly use the English versions, David and Solomon, just for familiarity. But it's worth remembering those original names because the sources themselves are quite focused on this specific cultural and historical context. It's about their character examination.
Right. Good context. Okay, so before we really jump in, let's nail down the main principle here. The sources seem to argue that the test, fundamentally, it's about the heart. It doesn't really matter what's happening on the outside.
That's it, exactly. Keeps coming back to that. The sources quote this idea that the test is designed to know what is in your heart.
Right.
So the circumstances, good or bad, they're just the setting, maybe, the laboratory, let's say, for the spiritual checkup.
A laboratory. I like that. So it's trying to find out what we actually rely on, what we love, maybe even what we secretly, worship.
Precisely. What truly governs our choices and affections when push comes to shove, or even when things are easy.
Okay, so let's unpack this two-sided view. Nobody's asking for the trial of the fire, the suffering part, obviously. But maybe we should be more worried about the trial of throne. Let's start there. The test of abundance, of success.
Yeah, the test of success. It's sneaky. I'd argue it's often maybe the more dangerous one.
How so?
Well, think about it. When everything on the outside is clicking, right? Job's good, relationships are fine, money's okay. Why would you feel that deep need for spiritual connection, for reliance on something beyond yourself?
Ah, right. It's that paradox the sources talk about this weird feeling of the heart becoming empty.
Yeah.
Or just distant from faith, even when the world's patting you on the back.
Exactly. You hit your targets, get the promotion, whatever, and instead of pure joy, there's this hollowness where the victory just feels temporary, doesn't quite satisfy. Prosperity, in this framework, it almost acts like a solvent, you could say. It dissolves that immediate sense of needing humility, needing to rely on faith.
Because you can fix things yourself.
Yeah. If you can solve most problems with, a quick call or writing a check, that urgency to turn inward or upward, it just fades, doesn't it?
It does.
And this external comfort, it lets this internal, maybe arrogance, or just self-sufficiency, it lets it take root. And often you don't even notice it happening.
And the sources point to King Solomon as the sort of poster child for this. Tragically.
Solomon is such a powerful case study here because his test wasn't about surviving hardship, not at all.
Yeah.
He started with everything.
Yeah, unbelievable wisdom, wealth,
Yeah.
gifts.
Directly gifted.
Yeah.
And his downfall, which is laid out in 1 Kings chapter 11, it happens when everything is almost too good, when life is smooth.
Okay, but wait a second. Wisdom.
Yeah.
Isn't that supposed to stop you from making dumb choices? He was the wisest guy around. Why does abundance lead him off the rails? The idols, foreign wives.
That's the absolute core of the trial of the throne, isn't it? His wisdom wasn't being tested by like a tricky philosophical problem. It was tested by his own power, his unlimited power and success. When you have basically infinite wealth and political power with no real checks, who's going to tell you no? Who challenges you?
Nobody.
The sources imply his heart drifted because he stopped being hungry for faith. He got hungry for, well, more stuff, more influence, more comfort. Security replaced reliance.
So the abundance created a blind spot, a spiritual blind spot. It wasn't just, oh, he married lots of women. The text specifically says his heart was led away by them towards their gods.
Yes, that's the crucial link.
His success basically allowed him to prioritize political convenience, personal desires over his core devotion.
That nails it. So the purification needed during success, It's about staying deeply devoted, staying humble. Even when everything around you is screaming, you're amazing, you did this.
Right, resisting that ego boost.
Because if the trial of suffering strips away externals, the trial of the throne, it tricks you. It subtly tempts you into worshiping the very things you've been given, the gifts themselves.
Wow. Okay, so translating that, if you're listening, and maybe you're doing really well, a successful entrepreneur, a leader, or even just things are comfortable, your test right now might not be about potential loss.
Probably not.
It's whether you start believing your own hype, confusing your own abilities with, divine blessing or something. The refinement is getting rid of that pride, that dependence on status.
It's like fighting spiritual gravity almost. The higher you go in worldly terms, the stronger the pull for the heart to drift away because those external supports feel so solid.
Okay, that's a sobering thought. Let's shift gears then. Let's pivot to the path we all kind of instinctively recognize as a trial. The fire,
Yeah.
suffering, loss, maybe betrayal, being misunderstood.
The hard stuff.
Yeah, the really hard stuff. But even here, the sources point out something strange, a paradox. Going through immense hardship often brings this unexpected feeling of closeness to faith.
Yes, this is what you might call the sieve of suffering. It shakes everything loose, doesn't it? Strips away all the superficial stuff.
And the key figure here is Job, or Ayub in the original texts.
Absolutely. Job is the archetype of resilience in this context. I mean, he lost everything, family, wealth, health, the works. But his response, in the face of just utter devastation, that's what the sources highlight as purity.
That famous line, the Lord gave and the Lord has taken away, blessed be the name of the Lord. The sources quote that from Job 1.21. It's like the ultimate surrender, right?
It is. It's profound. His trial essentially proved his devotion wasn't conditional. It wasn't transactional. I serve God because he's good to me. No.
It was just because God is God.
Exactly. And the sources are pretty clear. This kind of suffering, in Job's case at least, it's not punishment. It's purification. It's like that refining fire for gold. It burns away impurities to see what's genuinely real underneath.
Okay, but the texts also bring up another example where the suffering seems to have a more outward purpose, beyond just refining the person.
Yeah.
You mentioned Yusuf.
Yes, Joseph. His story, primarily in Genesis, is really a deep dive into, well, purposeful pain, you could.
Purposeful pain.
He was betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, then wrongly jailed. Years in this pit of despair, really.
Yeah.
Everything he thought his life would be just violently taken away.
So how does that suffering make him this channel of blessing, as the sources phrase it? What's happening there?
Well, the mechanism seems to be this. His terrible circumstances forced him to completely let go of his old identity. Favored son, dreamer with a future.
Yeah, all gone.
In that Egyptian prison, he was nobody, a zero. But he could still be useful. The suffering stripped away the self-reliance, maybe even some entitlement, and it built deep humility. It forced him to use his gifts, like interpreting dreams, but now to serve other people who are also powerless. The baker, the cupbearer.
Ah, okay, so he became useful not despite the pain, but almost because of it, or through it.
Absolutely. The trial seems to have burned away the self-pity, the focus on what happened to me, and instead it forged empathy and incredible practical skills like administration, which he learned under pressure.
Right, running the prison, basically.
Exactly. So later, when he's suddenly elevated, second only to Pharaoh, he has this amazing perspective. He looks back and says, this is Genesis 50.2, he says to his brothers, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good."
To accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives.
Wow, right. The purification process in his suffering wasn't just internal. It reshaped him to move beyond woe is me and actually use his hard-won experience as the very tool to bless and rescue others during that famine.
That's incredibly powerful. So the focus shifts from personal injustice to communal salvation.
It's presented as this ultimate example of how even the worst experiences, the deepest betrayals, can be woven into a larger purpose, a purpose of relief and rescue for many.
Okay, so we have these two starkly different paths. The test of the throne, the wealth, demanding we shed pride. And the test of the fire, the pain, demanding we shed self-pity and maybe entitlement. What's the connection? What are both tests really targeting?
That's the key question, isn't it? If you step back and look at the bigger picture the sources paint, both trials seem to be fundamentally attacking, well, self-focus.
Self-focus, interesting.
How so?
Pride, which is often fueled by abundance, is totally self-focused. Look what I did, I deserve this.
Right, yeah.
And self-pity, often triggered by suffering, is also self-focused. Why me? Look how unfairly I'm being treated.
Huh. Never thought of it that way, both rooted in I and me.
Exactly. So the goal, it seems, is to break our reliance on the self, whether that self is puffed up by success or paralyzed by pain, and instead to build this unconditional reliance on faith.
Regardless of circumstances.
That seems to be the core message. The ultimate focus is always on the sincerity, the purity of the heart. The sources seem to say the external situation, whether you're on a throne or in a prison, that's just the stage setting.
It's just the context for the real test.
Right. Both settings are testing whether our devotion depends on comfort or if it's absolute, unconditional.
Which brings us back to that analogy you mentioned earlier, refining metal. It does. The sources often circle back to that imagery. 1 Peter 1.7 is a key reference here, comparing faith to gold.
Okay.
Gold is tested by fire, right? To purify it, to prove it's genuine, so that ultimately it results in praise and glory. The point isn't the fire itself or the gold sitting untested. The point is the proven unconditional devotion that comes through the process, clean and verified.
So the fire burns away the dross, is that the word?
Yeah, the impurities, which could be pride if you're on the throne, or it could be self-pity if you're in the pit. What's left is just the pure loyalty of the heart.
Wow. It's really challenging to think that the same kind of spiritual work is needed when you're, say, closing a huge business deal as when you're dealing with a terrible loss.
It is counterintuitive.
But the sources make a strong case that the internal enemy, that ego, that self-sufficiency, is always the same, regardless of the outward situation.
And maybe that's the subtle warning here. We're often braced for the storm, you know. We prepare for hardship, but maybe we're spiritually unprepared for the calm. That's shot.
That's a really important point. Hashtag outro. Well, this has been quite a deep dive exploring character and spiritual purpose through these texts. To sort of wrap it up, the sources you brought define trials not just as obstacles we should try to avoid, but as these necessary processes of refinement.
Yeah, necessary tests.
We're tested, it seems, to see if we can stay humble, stay thirsty for faith, even when everything's going well. During abundance,
The throne test.
and conversely, if we can hold on to trust, and maybe even shift towards becoming a source of blessing for others when we're going through real adversity.
The fire test.
And the core insight really holds. The focus isn't on our status or our stuff.
No, the divine interest, according to these texts, is squarely on the heart's purity. Regardless of whether you're rich or poor, successful or struggling, the test is just, as that phrase repeats, to know what is in your heart, not really to judge your resume.
Right. Okay, so we'll leave you, our listener, with a final thought to chew on, something to reflect on depending on where you find yourself right now. If your current situation is mostly ease and success, you're maybe experiencing the test of the throne. What hidden pride, what comfortable reliance on worldly things might your heart be tested to release, to let go of?
That's a good question for reflection.
And if, on the other hand, your current situation is more about suffering, struggle, the test of the fire, then maybe the question is, how could this trial, this very pain, be preparing you to become a unique channel of blessing for others, maybe turning that experience into a purpose you can't quite see yet?
Powerful questions to sit with.
Definitely something to think about.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.